Bitcoin has everyone fooled right now after a massive rejection at 67.5K that brought us all the way down back towards 62K to find support. We are now waiting for confirmation of 64K as the important range. We are looking today across the higher timeframes for clues as to what is most likely to happen in the next 24 hours for the price. Welcome to Bitcoin Escape Plan. If you enjoyed the analysis, then leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you want a personal reminder of the levels that matter most every day in your email, then subscribe at bitcoinescapeplan.com. Let's get into the video. So we did just see another 4-hour SMA major flip to the upside. This will be important later on in the video. Let's go get our daily close level real quick. The daily close yesterday. This means it was also the weekly close, and it is Monday, meaning go ahead and check your email after this video releases for the newsletter. Again, bitcoinescapeplan.com if you want to go read that. 63.2K essentially is where we close the day and the week. And as you can see, we close just below the daily SMA before shooting up above it this morning. Now, I was initially in loss this morning, but I'm back in profit on my short, and I'm basically just waiting till the end of the month to see, do we get another retest of 60K, or are we complicit with that and are ready to head back to the upside for July, which is what I expect. So let's look for clues on the monthly time frame. So on the monthly time frame, broadly speaking, we expect a bearish print for June. Now, technically speaking, anything below about, 73.6K will be regarded as a bearish close. Now, I have no reason to believe whatsoever that magically in the next 8 days or however many days are left in June, that we're going to shoot back above that price, meaning that we have to accept that it's bearish, period. Again, anyone who's already following the channel knows this. Typically speaking, for a bear market year, we would expect to see between 3 and 4 green candles amidst a sea of red candles. We have seen 2 green candles, meaning we have 1 to 2 more green candles left in the year that we would expect to see. Now, me personally, I believe that that's probably going to be July, partially just because we had a long red body candle here for June. Same thing as February. February, we had a significant drop since October, and finally had enough room for some upside momentum into March, and it wasn't even a very strong one. You know, that very easily could have flipped bearish as well, and we're just kind of lucky that momentum was able to sustain and push us back towards 83K in May, which I did call out back in February. So what we're looking for, structurally speaking now, is just evidence of strength or weakness. So what are our clues for that? We've got about 2 clues right here, and then we have just interacted with our third clue. So we have the bottom band of the downtrend anchored VWAP. If you don't know what that is, go over here to courses. I explain in more detail there. Functionally speaking, this is a magnet. When the price breaks below it, it is going to seek the next structural point on the chart that has magnetic weight, gravitic weight, if you will, which for me is this guy over here. This is the Elder VWAP, which is, I drew that from 2011 to now. So this one shows us the volume and the weight from the price from the most recent high. This one shows us the volume and the weight of the price from the oldest lows that we are able to see on this chart. So the price, these are 2 separate things. But again, once we have lost this one, we will be pulled lower until such a time that we see, okay, actually we need to return to it. We eventually will break back above this. And quite frankly, I'll probably end up deleting this one. I would think sometime next year. I'll probably keep it for the majority of this year. But I tend to use the downtrend anchored VWAP ones just to give a better understanding of where we're headed towards the bottom. And then I get confirmation from the bottom with the Elder VWAP itself. All free tools you can use. Go over here to forecasting volume-based anchored VWAP, drop it on a candle, and magic will ensue. So what we have here is failure at that bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP, as well as failure at the point of control. The point of control is the place on the chart where the most human beings have pressed buy or sell. Very important psychologically speaking. We are below both those points. However, we are above the 64K Fibonacci pivot. Very, very important. Everyone on the channel already knows I talk about 64K pretty much every day of my life. and will continue talking about it probably for a long time, guys. Like, I think that this range will still be important into August and September, and I do think we will probably like have to retest this at some point next year as well, depending on how low we go this year and how quickly we rise into next year. Really, the only example I see on the chart that would, invalidate that is this guy right here. This is 2018, 2019. This is the last time Donald Trump was president. And I do think it is probably the most important thing that we need to be paying attention to on the chart. It is how I've been able to call out all of the major ranges most recently, is just by taking a brief historical study of the 2018 chart on both the higher and lower time frames and transposing that to what we are seeing currently. That's why I believe we're going to see a lower high form in July. The only difference primarily being that we have our monthly SMA interaction at a different time period than we would typically expect. We hit it way earlier than we would typically expect. So we basically are going to have a scenario either where we stay around the midpoint, which this is my base case, is that we stay around the midpoint pretty much deep into September. We don't necessarily have to set new lows there, but functionally speaking, this would be the same thing as us staying between 76.3K and about 64K is corroborated by this time on the chart, where you basically add a zero and we're seeing the same thing. I say this all the time, Bitcoin is math, not just money. And a lot of times the price will want to return to relative quote unquote safety or just familiarity. So that's, I think, why we are seeing so much similarity here. Other than, of course, that Satoshi Nakamoto is actually the CIA or whatever. I don't really care. What I care is that it's predictable. That's what's important. So we're either going to see a circumstance where we see a major drop-off towards the end of the year. I personally think that will probably be weakness of the Fed or having to actually print their way out of whatever happens with the bond market. This is also dependent upon whether or not stocks start to show significant weakness by the end of the year. That is what I believe, but I know a lot of people think that we're going to see a super cycle for the AI stocks, which is possible, definitely possible. Obviously, there's never been a time in human history before where we can talk to another generalized intelligence besides humans. So it is novel, it is something that could produce upside. I don't think that it's really going to apply to Bitcoin that way. So we're basically looking either for a circumstance where we have volatile to the downside towards the end of the year, which is what most people are anticipating, a Q4 bottom in October or November. And then I would expect, in the event of another Trumpapalooza, we would expect that to violently shoot up to the upside and to be already back to relative highs, basically by this time next year. So if you can be very patient, you'll be rewarded for buying at these times. However, history does show us that we probably are going to have another opportunity to buy that's a little better. The only other instance I think is relevant for us is over here in 2022. Obviously 2022, similar, though not the same, and we did start losing the plot earlier. This is primarily because of the Celsius, Voyager, BlockFi, etc. bankruptcies at that time. So that caused that earlier in the year, whereas again, I think it's probably going to be later in this year, and it would be primarily weakness in the Fed that would cause that. Let's go take a look at 2014 real quick before we move on to the weekly time frame. 2014, kind of like a healthy marriage of the two of those, actually. So we have both our time around the midpoint, as well as a slightly more staggered drop, closer to 2018 in this respect. But then unlike 2018, 2019, we have a longer period of consolidation at the lows. Basically a whole year of the pre-halving year, this being 2015. And then that's when we started to see a rise. So basically speaking, what we would expect is either a sheer drop-off, which would probably happen later in the year, I think, or just continued consolidation at roughly where we are with one sharp decline lower, and then immediately we're going to start rising above it. So all that really matters is that you have cash to allocate, I think, later in this year. There's nothing wrong with buying at these prices. Anyone who buys below the monthly or the weekly SMA will be rewarded over a long enough time period if they're able to hold on to the Bitcoin. So Nothing really complex about that. For everyone who was asking me questions about buying Bitcoin last year on threads analysis and everything, you can buy it. You just have to accept that the price is going to go down. The last time I actually bought Bitcoin, I think was over here. I think it was like at the end of 2024. I may have added a little bit when it dropped to 76 in 2025, but I was mostly focused on really getting my analysis down and just understanding how the price behaves. That's typically how it works, is you have long periods of time where the price is going to keep going up, and you can add to it, but you're not going to get as reliable gains as at the bottom. And then what you really need to improve is your accuracy, is your ability to anticipate the price. So before I move into the weekly time frame, if you are enjoying these daily uploads, do let me know with a comment down below. Subscribe, send these videos to another human being if you find them to be valuable and helpful in explaining the price. I do really appreciate all the support that you guys give me. And yeah, this is a normal part of my routine now, just talking about Bitcoin every single day on the charts. And it's nice that I'm sometimes accurate. All right, so on the weekly time frame, pretty much same story. Anyone who was paying attention to the price yesterday knows we did close the week and the day below the 64K Fibonacci pivot, as well as below the daily SMA, and then immediately started to snap up after that. Now, at the moment, that's an engulfing candle. So an engulfing candle would indicate to us that we're probably going to see downside after that, as far as I'm aware, but we need to wait longer in the week to see if we can break the body of the candle above as well as the body of the candle below. Now, we did have significant points of weakness here. Same thing as I talked about on the other time frame. We had weakness at the point of control, specifically this week, not just this month, but this week, last week rather, we had weakness there. As well as weakness at the bottom band of the downtrend anchor view up. So again, that's 2 points of weakness that were not present the week before, as well as a close below the 64K Fibonacci pivot, which is also objectively weak. Keep that in mind that this is fresh off of a weekly SMA rejection as well. So 4 points of weakness at the moment, which is really why, and I talk about this in the newsletter today, I think that we're about to flip bullish. I think we're about to flip bullish in a very meaningful way. And I'm pretty much just waiting to see if 64K can be confirmed as support or resistance first. I'm hoping we get one more test a little bit lower, even down to 62. I would probably take that to flip long at the moment, because I'm not convinced that we're going to see another retest of 60K or lower. The historical context is we have about 2 weeks where the wick is equivalent to the February wick or slightly lower. This is for 2018. Let's see real quick. And pray to God that I don't mess up the chart with zooming too much. So yeah, over here, we did continue to get these lows into June, basically the whole month until the very end. And then we started to find functional support and rise higher. Now, it is important to note these are consecutive red candles where we do have a couple green candles interspersed. So just a little bit more chop now, but I would still largely anticipate the same thing, which is a rise into July towards the end of the month that ultimately results in another failure of the weekly SMA to the downside. Because that's what always happens. That's what always happens is we see breaks and retests above the weekly SMA that ultimately result in downside momentum until we're able to get sufficiently past that, which is always in the pre-halving year, not in the bear market year. So what we would anticipate is significant weakness. This is the other important thing to note. This is why I use the Elder VWAP the way that I use it, because it predictably is able to show you where the bottoms could be, essentially, which is basically we anticipate the price to go slightly below it. Now, over a long enough period of time, what I actually anticipate is that the price is going to get further from this. So I don't know that I believe that it's this cycle. I think it's more likely that it would be next cycle, actually, because a lot of money is about to flow into the markets. So it may be this cycle that we just barely break below it or that we skirt just above it. Either way, that level is currently at about 38.8K, which again, means we will be pulled in that direction. Again, I think later in the year, not necessarily now. That's towards the end of Q3 into Q4 that I would anticipate an interaction with that. I do not think that we're about to see an interaction with that tomorrow. So it will take a little bit longer for that to play out. And just for posterity's sake, I do believe that the actual lows for this cycle are probably between 34 and 39K. We've got a lot of support at 32 and 35K that is propping up the price. And just psychologically speaking, it's like the midpoint of the midpoint, basically, is right around there. So that would be sufficient enough pain where all of the ETF holders are panicking and having to decide if they're going to nuke their retirement by selling the assets or just adding more or just being patient. So until that serious conviction test has concluded, which again, I don't think is going to happen really until Q3, Q4. I think we're going to chop here until deep into September, essentially. So what I am anticipating is a rise into the month of July. What would that mean? That would mean that we need to see strength at the 64K Fibonacci pivot, which we are currently seeing. Now, obviously, it's very early in the week, and we will see as we go to the daily and 4-hour timeframes in just a moment that that's not necessarily ready just yet. We will see. We need to form a little bit more support in this range before we're ready to rocket back to the upside. And then same thing, just in reverse order, we would need to see strength at the bottom band of the downtrend anchored VWAP as well as the point of control. And this is something that could take a process of multiple weeks. However, again, what we saw is that the highs for July in 2018 were towards the end of the month. And what I'm noticing from futures contracts in general is the highs or lows rather, typically seem to be concentrated by either the beginning or the end of the month. I don't study the futures contracts or the CME ones that much. I mostly stay focused on the Coinbase ones, but it's pretty normal for us to see like the May high was in like May 6th. And what that means is that anybody who got into April contracts just rolled them over into May and then closed them at the beginning of the month and then went short. And then same thing, they rolled those over into June and then closed them at the beginning of June and likely went long. And now same thing, they will likely roll them over into July. And then when we get the highs in July, we'll likely close them and then go short. So it's a lot of just like big money moves slow. Big money moves around predictable things like expiration dates. All we can really do is anticipate the history and the probability on the chart, which again, I believe tells us that on a monthly time frame, we will see a lower high form in July. For me personally, that does not discredit another test of the weekly SMA. We certainly can have that. I would still anticipate that it's going to result in failure because that's what it always results in. During a bear market year, but I would still anticipate that the price itself does not go any higher than 76.3K in the month of July. And I will have to revisit that, obviously, if I'm incorrect. The highest I can believe is 80K, but I don't know. I can feel it in my jellies that it's probably going to wick no higher than 76.3K. And if it does, it'll be very, very brief. But regardless, a candle close below 76.3K is what I am anticipating there. And I'll just be prepared to short the living hell out of it at that time. On to the daily time frame. So the daily time frame, as we talked about at the beginning of the video, we just had a flip back below the daily SMA after a test and failure, rejection. We had strength form there, but we got pushed down, which could have just been manipulation. We did see some severe manipulation. I think it was even earlier than I had said in yesterday's video. In yesterday's video, I said to expect it by 4 p.m. PST. I think it was like 2 p.m. PST that we started to see that major manipulation enter the market. So that was enough for us to get pretty bullish now, where, if we close the day where we are now, we still got about 6 hours for that. That will be objectively enough room for us to stay above the daily SMA. However, nothing really preventing this compression period right here on the Bollinger Bands from us hitting here and immediately getting rejected down lower one more time before building strength into July, which again, the July highs could be into the end of the month, according to the 2018 chart, as well as, I think that they're trying to get Clarity Act done by July 4th rather. Doesn't mean that they will, but they're really going to try and get it done before the August recess. I do not speak politics, but I think that's when they go and get their snacks and their juice boxes. Anyways, so that's what I'm anticipating, is we are going to see a flip on the daily SMA sooner than later, and we are seeing compression on the Bollinger Bands, which means it will likely be violent to one side or the other. We are running out of time where a low is relevant. Now, I talked a lot about 53.5K being the lowest I can believe for June. A lot of people are quoting me on that. That's when I say something with the literal phrasing that I just said of it's the lowest I can believe that we will go. It doesn't mean that we will go there. It means that that's the lowest that I can believe we will go in the stated time frame. So we may have to just accept that 59.1K was as low as we're going to go for now. And therefore, back to thesis number one, which is a lower high in July. Let's see if the 4-hour time frame is telling us roughly the same thing. So we did have a 4-hour SMA retest on Saturday. We broke back above it. And then as you can see, on Sunday, we broke below it. Pretty severe manipulation candle before, again, starting to rise above it. So we did get here as high as 65.5K. Previously, we were showing 65K as resistance, so breaking through that is meaningful, though we're struggling with it at the moment, with price being at about 64.6K right now. So it's still kind of showing that 65K is a point of rejection on the way to 66K. And then largely the same thing on the way down from the drop earlier in June. We stopped at 64K and 67K. So I think those are probably the most important points to pay attention to, other than the ones I've already said, the point of control, the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP, pretty much across timeframes. Those are the ones that we're going to need to get confirmed support and strength at before we're really able to mount a rise higher. And then again, I don't really anticipate that rise higher is going to be that explosive. Like I think it is 76.3K is like the highest that I really can believe. I could be wrong, of course. I just don't think that I am. So what am I looking for in the next 24 hours? Well, me personally, I got to be prepared to close my short if we start to show strength above basically where we are right now. You know, like I'm already pretty close to my cost basis. I had originally closed my other short in like 160% of profit. I think around here, somewhere around here, 63, 64K. And then I re-entered another one, I want to say over here perhaps, which is not even, I'm breaking my own rules. Anyone who follows the channels knows that's technically a long, not a short. But I don't know. I personally am of two camps at the moment. I'm not opposed to us hitting 60K again, but that's a limited trade. You know, that's a limited trade that I am chasing or exposing myself to. Essentially, when I've already said this in every video for weeks now, I am anticipating a lower high in July, which means I should be long, not short right now. So really just waiting for that last confirmation of support or resistance at 64K. And at that time, I would like to be able to enter a long lower than that, but I don't know that I'm going to get anything lower than this most recent tap at 62K. So you may just have to accept that you're going to have to get into this position wherever you are, rather than where you would like it to be. And that's where I am at the moment, is I did not time the low absolutely perfectly. I am going to start, I think, implementing a combination of ETH perpetuals as well as Bitcoin perpetuals. I'm not going to talk about ETH on this channel. I'm so sorry, everyone. This is a Bitcoin only channel. But I do think I'm going to start doing that just so that I don't have to be short for Bitcoin and miss the long for Bitcoin, because I'm still waiting to see, okay, do I compound this short? Do I stay in the short? So having both perpetuals will allow me to kind of play both sides of the game instead of, having to worry about futures contracts and expirations and rollovers and all that shit. I definitely prefer perpetuals contracts personally. So in the next 24 hours, that's what I'll be paying attention to, 64K and 66K. And expect the price to react around 65K. I think on the daily time frame it's like 65.8. 65.8 right there. So we did have a rejection off of that. So again, if we close the daily above the daily SMA, obviously, If we close it over here, that's going to give us enough momentum to want to test 65.8K very, very soon. And it could again start to open us up to the upside fairly quickly. So that's what I would say at the moment is we are seeing compression on the 4-hour and the daily time frame on the Bollinger Bands, which means we should expect to see significant volatility very, very soon. So I would be careful, be very cautious of your bias at the moment. And again, I would keep in mind what I just articulated, that you can be biased towards the downside right now, and that's fine. However, I have every reason to believe that we are going to see a lower high form in July, just based on the chart and the seasonality. That's pretty normal for a drop in June, rise in July, failure, and then consolidation. Pretty normal. So that's what I would be anticipating, is we need confirmation essentially of the break of this range. And I will, of course, update you on that more tomorrow here on bitcoinescapeplan.com/YouTube. That's where we actually are, is YouTube. Anyways, if you want to book a one-on-one call, you can do so in the link in my description down below. Book a Calendly call. You can go read my book, and you can go watch the video after this to understand how I make lots of profits just off of looking at one chart, the Advanced Bitcoin Trading course. Go check it out. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.